So Hare Krishna, everybody. This is day 15 of our Gita Gyan, and the chapter will be chapter 15. So this is dedicated to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamin Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesha Sunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare, Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Jai Sri Sri Jagannath Baladev Subhadra Mai Sri Sri Nitai Sundar Gaura Hari. And this is Sri Sri Radha Shamashundar from ISKCON Vrindavan Temple. It's a close-up. Sri Sri Radha and Shamasundar. Shamasundar means the blackish or dark, beautiful form. Sundar means beautiful. Shama means blackish. So, Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vigna Vinasha Narasimhaiti Namini Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langaitim Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Mishwaram Om Tat Sat. So let us begin with the Gita Mahatmya. Sa Mukta Sa Sukhi Loke Karmana Nopalipyate Mahapapati Papani Gita Dhyayai Karoti Chet Na Kinchit Sprusyate Tasya Nalini Dalam Ambasha. A person who is devoted to studying the Gita is liberated and happy. Although acting in this world, he is not implicated. Even if by chance a person who studies the Gita happens to commit extremely horrible sins, he cannot be affected by that, just as a lotus leaf cannot be touched by even a drop of water. So it's a very interesting verse over here. If there are any questions on that, later we can talk. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we will be recapping the slides from yesterday. This is the three modes of material nature, right? Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. That was yesterday's title. So we mainly talked about, we began with Prakriti Jnana. What is the reason we need to understand about material nature? So by understanding material nature and how it works, we can eventually come to the conclusion that it all rests upon the direction of the Supreme Lord. And then we heard about how we talked about the differentiation of the Prakriti, how from Pradhan, unmanifested, it became Prakriti manifested, and then it started to differentiate, and that became Mahatattva. And in Mahatattva, we heard about how the differentiation occurs from the Panchabhuta to the Pancha Jnanendriyas to the Pancha Karmendriyas to the Pancha Tanmatras, and like that. We heard about how also the three bodies, the two bodies, we have the gross material body, the subtle material body, and the soul, and how it is transferred from life to life. So therefore, this is basically, and then from there, we understood about how this Prakriti is actually governed by certain laws. And these laws are called, one is the law of karma, and then there is also how the three modes of nature act upon this Prakriti, this material creation. Mode of goodness, mode of passion, mode of ignorance. And we talked about the characteristics of these three modes and also what is the result of these three modes. So then transcending the three gunas. So the idea is the yogi or the bhakta is supposed to transcend these three gunas. So by following the processes defined, they will transcend these three gunas, and in this way they will attain the situation of transcendence. So what is this transcendence? How do we understand who is transcended and who has not? So Krishna gives some description. Arjuna asks about this, and Krishna describes the sthita prajna, right? Certain qualities were outlined, so by which we can understand who is the person who has gone beyond the three modes. And then ultimately, the purpose behind all this knowledge is to understand the Param Gatim, the ultimate destination, the ultimate abode, which is the Supreme Lord's lotus feet. So the key takeaways from here, in summary, the material creation is like the mother, and Krishna is the seed-giving father for how the jivas enter into this material world. Actually, the jivas are already created by the Supreme Lord. But just like how the scorpion comes out from the bag of rice, it may look like material creation is the mother, but actually it's not. The seed material creation is just the place where it hosts the belligerent jivas who are trying to enjoy in this material creation. Then we talked about the three gunas, quality and results, and how by bhakti we can transcend the three gunas. And we gave an example, the story about Mrigari the hunter, how he was in mode of ignorance so much, but somehow by following the bhakti path and by the blessings of Narada, and he was able to very easily transcend. And Krishna also states that he is that basis of the Brahman. So we were talking about transcendence. Transcendence means coming to the level of Brahman realization. But Krishna says, I am the basis of that Brahman. So more intelligent people will try to understand further what is beyond Brahman. So today is chapter 15, Yoga of the Supreme Person. So this is called Purushottama Yoga. It comes from the word Purusha and Uttama. So Purusha means the enjoyer and Uttama means the highest or the supreme. The supreme enjoyer. So therefore the supreme person and the yoga of that person. So to understand about that. So to begin, we will revise again what we have gone through before. So I've shown this model several times already. So the Bhagavad Gita basically talks about 5 truths or tattva, 5 tattvas or 5 truths. So it is talking about Ishvara and it's talking about Jiva. So it's talking about the nature of all of us. Who are we actually? We are spirit soul. And at the same time, there is another spirit soul. And this is called the super soul, which is situated with us within our heart. But that's just the localized expansion. The original situated personality is Purushottama or Purusha Uttama, the supreme person. And he is also called Parameshvara or Ishvara, the controller. So it's about us and it's about God and it's about our relationship between us and God. So chapters 1 to 6 talked about us and talked about our relationship with God, the different yogas. And then chapter 7 and 12, it's particularly explored more into the bhakti path of the yoga, and it explored more about the Supreme Lord, Ishvara. So this was covered in more detail, right? The Vibhuti Yoga, where we heard about Krishna's Vibhutis, and then how in various ways Krishna said, I'm this, I'm that. So like that, we could try to understand and remember him. But Bhagavad Gita also talks about material creation. So the material creation is part of the energy of the Supreme Lord. It's a shadow of the spiritual Lord's higher energy. Basically, it's the shadow. And we heard about in detail from chapter 13 onwards, we heard more about Prakriti, how Prakriti was produced, how it was transforming. So in summary, we heard about these things. And we heard about how the Jiva enters into Prakriti. So by the presence of Kala, together with Prakriti and Kala, the Jiva is able to enter into Prakriti, and then he causes activities, he creates activities or karma. So the Jiva comes into Prakriti and he produces actions and therefore reactions. So this is called karma. So of these five, one of these is not eternal. The rest of them are all eternal. Ishvara is eternal, Jiva is eternal, Kala within the material creation is eternal. It's not there in the spiritual creation, but it's within the material creation. Time. So, but at the same time, there is always transformation within material creation. Though it is eternal, it never remains the same. So there is always transformation. Sometimes it's unmanifested, sometimes it's manifested. So in this way, it keeps on going. So all these four are eternal except for karma. And yeah, okay, so then we continue. So while the Jiva enters into this Prakriti, this material creation, he performs activities. So, and by performing these activities, he gets trapped. He gets trapped into the cycle of life and death. So in this way, he gets conditioned, because the moment Jiva enters into Prakriti, he becomes conditioned. So he becomes overwhelmed by this Prakriti Shakti, which is very vast. So it's like a small person who drops into this large ocean. So the ocean is so large, even if the person knows how to swim, eventually they will get overwhelmed. So this overwhelming is Maya or illusion. They get overwhelmed by illusion. And due to that, they get into forgetfulness, and they do not understand what is right, what is wrong, what is sin, what is not sin. And they forsake the laws of God. And in this way, they desire to only satisfy their senses and their desires. So then they get trapped in this cycle of birth and death. So then Krishna, then he says, okay, we talked about Prakriti in detail, chapter 13 and 14. Okay. So what does the Jiva do while within the Prakriti? He performs activities, right? He performs karma. So in this chapter, we will talk a little bit about karma, not a lot, just a bit about the nature of this karma. And then it will go on to discuss more about the Supreme Lord Ishvara. So in 15.1, it begins like this. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Urdhva Moolam Adashakam Ashwatham Prahur Avyayam Chandamsi Yasya Parnani Yastam Veda Savedavit. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. So what is Krishna trying to say? So he's speaking in very poetic manner, in using allegories and things like that. So basically he's talking about, okay, I will explain what he's mentioning. But here what he's saying that there is a banyan tree, and this banyan tree is upside down in this world. The roots are upwards, the branches are downwards, and they go on eternally. And the leaves of this Vedic, the leaves of this tree are like the Vedic hymns. And one who knows this entire tree understands the purpose behind the Vedas. So what is this tree that Krishna is talking about? So then he continues further about this tree. The branches of this tree extend downwards, because it's upside down tree. It extends downwards, and at the same time it extends upwards also. Just like the banyan tree, it has upwards and downwards. Nourished, and what is the nourishment for this tree? It is nourished by the three modes of material nature, which is tamas, sattva, and rajas. So we can begin to get a hint at what Krishna is driving at. He's basically talking about, because the tree is very complicated, so many branches, so many leaves, so many fruits, right? So he's basically talking about the network of activities which we do within this material world. All the different activities. Basically, this tree represents our karma, all our action, all the different activities that we do. So the branches are like different paths that we take. We take this path or we take that path. And this entire karma, all this nature of this karma is fed by these three modes of nature: tamas, sattva, and rajas. So if we want to be free from karma, we have to be able to transcend these three modes: tama, sattva, and raja, because it's the nourishment. It continues to give nourishment. So until we can cut off the nourishment, the source of the nourishment, then it's not possible for us to transcend. So, sometimes we are able to cut down a tree. Sometimes artificially we may say, okay, I'm renounced, I don't feel like doing this. Just like sometimes we eat our favorite food. We eat the favorite food every day, then we get very tired of it and say, I'm not going to look at this food again. So this is like, I've renounced it, tyaga. But this is temporary. After some time, again, once desire comes, after so many years, oh, I always remember this food which I wanted to eat. So again, desire comes back. So this is called tyaga and bhoga. So we renounce for a while, and then again we want it back, and then we enjoy it for a while, and then again we renounce it. We get tired of it. So just like trees, sometimes some certain trees, even if you cut it down, it will still grow back. So when we cut it, it's tyaga, and then when it grows back, it's bhoga, enjoyment again. So the way to do this is to uproot it from the roots. So the weeds, right? We want to uproot it. We just don't cut off. So the tamas, sattva, and raja has to be transcended. The three modes have to transcend. So then Krishna continues, the twigs are the objects of the senses. So the twigs are basically why we take certain different paths in the branches, because let's say someone desires to enjoy great wealth. So, and then he decides to take a particular path, a particular direction. He wants to, let's say, enjoy the wealth based on speculation, maybe forex exchange or whatever. So he takes a particular path in his life. Another person may want to do it by business. So he may take a different path like that. So, and then what does the branches lead to? They lead towards the twigs, right? They eventually come to the twigs. So the twigs are the objects of the senses. So because we have a goal, why we take certain paths? Because we have a goal to attain in those, at the end of those paths. So these twigs are like what we want. What are the goals we have? For example, economic development, sense gratification, or mundane religiosity. Basically, mundane religiosity here means it's like karma kanda. We perform rituals and sacrifices so that we can get what we like, what we want in our life. Or pursuing sense objects. So, in terms of the tanmatras, form, here, sound, we want to attain what we desire, basically the sense objects. So then Krishna continues, this tree also has roots going down. So not only it's going upwards, the same roots is also going downwards. So can you imagine? It's a very complicated tree. So in other words, Krishna is saying, once we get started with karma kanda or fruitive activities, what he's trying to say here is that there is no end. It keeps on going from down, up in every direction, and it ensnares us in so many networks. One activity has many other activities branching out of it. So in this way, we get trapped. So it's a network. And these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So what are the fruitive actions? The fruitive actions are it all basically ends up in either pious acts, or sinful acts, impiety. So either punya or papa. So in this way, we enjoy or suffer within this tree. So like the Devatas, they are in the higher branches of the tree. So they are able to exert more control at the lower branches, but they are still within the tree. They are still trying to enjoy the various fruits of the tree. So the human beings are somewhere in the middle, and the animals and lower life forms are in the lower parts of the tree. So it's like the chain down, the food. And Krishna says the real form of this tree cannot be perceived in this world. We cannot understand really where one thing begins and where one thing ends. So while we are in this world, while we are conditioned, we cannot hope to begin to understand where it began and where it ended, because our vision is limited within this conditioning that we have. So at the same time, we have never seen such a tree, isn't it? So it's an upside down tree. So basically, it's like a perverted reflection of the real activities. So why we do these activities? Because they are a perverted reflection of the real activities which we do in the spiritual world. So in the spiritual world also, people will be eating and they will be doing things and activities, but there is a very big difference. So that in similarity, it looks like the tree, the reflection and the tree looks almost the same, but there is difference in terms of, one is simply a mirror image, Maya, right? And whereas the other one, it is actually the truth, Tattva. So the differences are in material activity. It's called a perverted reflection, because though the activities seem the same, in the material world, the activities are aimed towards one thing only, to satisfy our own desires. Selfish in general, most of the time, whether it's our own desire or external, our body, our family, to satisfy the desire of my family members. It's basically an extension of our own body only, the family. So, or to extend for the satisfaction of my relatives, or for the satisfaction of my society, or for the satisfaction of my nation. So in this way, extension. So therefore, that's the thing about the material activities. Whereas spiritual activities, the same activities may be going on. One may be doing things, someone may be doing cooking, someone may be everything else is the same, but it's directed towards the satisfaction of the Supreme Lord. So therefore, this is the real activity. So in this world, it's difficult for us to understand. No one can understand where it ends, where it begins, where its foundation is. So in this regard, I'd like to tell a short story. So there was once a king in a city, right, in one kingdom, and he had a very wonderful jewel. So here's the jewel, and he put it in a necklace. He had many jewels, but this is one of the more precious ones. It's a very beautiful sapphire. This sapphire is a real sapphire. It is from the crown jewels. So anyway, he gave this to he had one daughter, and this daughter is a princess, and he loved her very much. And for her birthday, 20th birthday, he gave this jewel to her. So this is the daughter. And this daughter also, she cherished this jewel very much. And they say diamonds are a girl's best friend. So anyway, so she liked it very much, and she would wear it everywhere she went. So one day they went to bathe near a river. They went for an excursion. So in the river, she didn't want to wear the jewel and bathe in the river, because she was afraid that the waves might take it away or something. While she's playing, she may not know that it's dropped. So she took the jewel and she hung it on a tree branch nearby with all her other clothes. So suddenly, unfortunately, while she was bathing, suddenly this bird came. This is a magpie, the thieving magpie. So this magpie likes to steal bright, shiny things. So it saw this jewel necklace hanging on a tree branch, and it came and it grabbed it and it flew away before anybody could stop it. So then it's lost. Everybody, you can imagine the situation. They are, such a precious jewel is gone. So the princess was inconsolable. And then they all went back to the king, and they told the king, okay, this happened. This magpie came and stole it. So who knows where it might have kept it? It might have dropped it in any place or anywhere along the kingdom, right? So anyway, so the king sent out a reward. He sent out a proclamation telling that anyone within this kingdom who is able to find this jewel, they will get a very huge reward. They will probably, I don't really know the details of the reward, but it's like maybe they get to become royalty. They may able to something big. Anyway, so there was this one person. Everybody was looking for the jewel. They went looking for it high and low. They searched all the trees. They went about. But you can imagine in one city, or in one country, so many trees are there, so many places are there. Could be anywhere. So that this one person, he was a simple farmer. He was walking along, and then he happened to walk by near a river bank. So as he was walking, he suddenly saw something sparkling in the water. You can see here, something sparkling in the water. So then he thought, okay, that looks interesting. So he went to get a closer look. It was shimmering in the sunlight, catching the sunlight, and it was shimmering under the water. And then he realized, oh, this must be the jewel. Oh my goodness, my fate is going to change. So then immediately he entered into the water, and then he tried to, as soon as he entered, ripples form everywhere. So it also became a little murky, but he thought it must be there only. And then he was grabbing, trying to find it, trying to grope for it, but he could not get it. So then he was puzzled. Then he came out of it again, and then waited until the water settled down. And then he saw it started to appear there again. Then he thought it must be there. Then again, he started jumping into the water. But same thing again, he could not find the jewel. So he was doing this a few times, and he was frustrated a little. Where could it go? And he was loudly saying things. But nearby, unknown to him, nearby to that tree and the bank, there was a sage who was practicing some austerities near the tree. And this loud splashing and cursing of this man, it attracted the attention of the sage. And the sage looked at him and addressed him. And then this man got a jump. Wait, who's talking to me? And then he looked and he found the sage. And the sage said, what is the problem? And then the man said, well, there's this jewel which is on this water, and it's underneath. And I'm trying to catch it, but each time I go, I'm not able to find it. But when I come out, when the water settles, again, I see it over there. So the sage, he smiled, and he said, well, you're so busy to look down. You're so busy trying to find the object of your attraction, of your senses. You're so focused in the object of your senses that you do not understand what is happening. So if I tell you where the jewel is, would you take it away and leave me in peace? Then the man said, yes, certainly. Then the sage said, well, look up. Then the man said, look up? What do you mean look up? Say, yeah, look up. Then the man thought, what, you want me to think about God or anything like that? No, look up. And then the man said, why should I look up? The jewel is in the water, down. And then the sage said, oh, just trust me, just look up. And then the man finally looked up. And then he saw the jewel, the necklace, hanging on a tree branch. So then he realized, I must have seen the reflection in the water. And this is what's happening. It's the reflection of the jewel. The real jewel is actually up, not down. So this story is instructive because this then is actually our situation. We all have desires, don't we? We all have different things that we want in our lives. Nobody can say that they have no desires. Somebody wants good family. Somebody wants a good relationship with whatever. Somebody wants lots of money and everything. Somebody wants good health. So if a genie comes and asks us, there will be all kinds of things we would be telling. But ultimately, we are all looking for one thing. Because we are looking for the things that we are looking for, because we believe these things will give us happiness. These things will give us pleasure. So therefore, we are misguidedly thinking that these material things will give us that lasting happiness. So in other words, we are searching for that jewel of happiness in the reflection of the water, rather than looking for it actually where it is, right? So therefore Krishna says, but this tree is very complex, it's very long, the branches go up and down, but with determination one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. So one must learn to become detached from material activities, right? And in this way, cut down this strongly rooted tree of desires, of all these activities. So then he continues, thereafter, but that's not the end of the story. Just applying detachment alone in our life is not sufficient. Because how long can we remain detached? So that's the problem with the jnana path. So in the jnana path, one artificially tries very hard by following the different processes, right? The Astanga yoga has different processes. So one tries to forcibly control the mind mechanically. In this way, he brings his mind to peace, and he suppresses and pushes down all desires. So, but it's always going to be there. So that's going to be a problem. So after the problem is, the human mind is not meant to be vacant. It is meant to be filled. So it's either we fill it with material desires. If we suppress it and we leave it empty, then something needs to enter there. It cannot remain empty forever. There is agitation. The mind has to have something to focus upon. Can we have empty mind? It's not possible, right? It has to focus upon something. So it's either that it focuses upon its material desires, and through the jnana path, we make it empty temporarily, but it's not going to really work well unless we, very rare is the person who's able to achieve that through that path. Eventually, the idea is to come to the point of bhakti. Because when we come to the point of bhakti, then we can fill our empty mind with spiritual activities, with spiritual understanding, with service towards the Supreme Lord. So our meditations become always on that aspect, no longer on the desires of the senses. So that is basically what the ultimate understanding is. So just cutting down the tree is not sufficient. Detachment alone is not going to lead us anywhere. Temporarily, we may be free, right? But it will eventually come down. So that's why a lot of jnanis and yogis, they may take up these paths of, the jnana path, and they may do meditation for some time. They may even develop mystic powers. But after some time, they will come back. What they renounced at one point of time as Maya and as material, and they leave everything and do this, but eventually they again come back into society. And because of a want of nothing better to do, because they fail to understand the higher aspect, they start engaging themselves again in material activities. So they will end up building hospitals, they will do lots of different charity work, they will do things like that, and then they will try to get followers. People will come and take up followership under them, and they will teach some good things, some pious activities. You should do certain good things, you should read Bhagavad Gita and whatever. So, but ultimately they do not understand the goal of that Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, one must seek that place. Therefore, Krishna says, one must seek that place from which, having gone, one never returns. So simply attaining Brahman level is not sufficient. And there, surrender to that Supreme Personality of Godhead. So ultimately, one has to achieve the Supreme Form, the Supreme Lord Himself, and engage oneself in His loving service, in His seva. So that is the ultimate the position of the jiva. Jivera Swarupa Hoy, Krishnera Nitya Das. Das means servant. So that is the actual position. And this servant, this position of servitude is nothing to be avoided. It's not something which is horrible. It is very, very sweet. And by that position of sweetness, one can relish the relationship with the Supreme Lord in different varieties, as one's child, as one's parent, as one's a spouse, or a lover, or a friend. So in different ways, one can relish this relationship with the Supreme Lord. And there surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom everything has extended since time immemorial. So this is basically the essence of the message of the Bhagavad Gita. So Krishna says it in different ways for our understanding. And yet still people get confused. And despite Krishna saying it in so many ways, they still sometimes interpret the Bhagavad Gita in their own way, and they misunderstand the spirit of the Gita. So that's why Prabhupada wrote Bhagavad Gita as it is, to present as it is, without any motivated interpretations. So they twist the meanings. Okay, so then who can understand this Purushottama? So here Krishna finally came to the point of surrender to the Purushottama, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna says, ultimately, who can begin to understand the Purushottama, his actual position and his situation? So Krishna goes on from this verse 15:5. Those who are free from false prestige, illusion, and false association. Those who understand the eternal. So in other words, Krishna is saying, those who have attained the Brahman realization by whichever process of bhakti or yoga, then their minds are very ready to understand the full mysteries of the Purushottama, the Supreme Lord. Who are done with material lust. So come to the point of Brahman means they are already renounced lust. They are free from illusion, false association, prestige. Who are freed from the dualities of happiness and distress. They have become equipoised in their mind and are not affected by dualities of happiness or distress in executing their duties. And who, unbewildered, so that means beyond Maya, know how to surrender unto the Supreme Person and attain to that eternal kingdom. So again, the key word here, surrender to that Supreme Person. So ultimately, whichever path it takes, whether it's the Jnana path, the Jnana path eventually must lead to Bhakti. Then it goes stage by stage, right? From Karma Yoga to Jnana Yoga to Dhyana Yoga, and it must lead to Bhakti Yoga. So if somebody performs Karma Yoga and then does not progress to Jnana Yoga, he's stagnant, he's not progressing. Or if somebody goes to Jnana Yoga level and then he does not progress to Dhyana Yoga, then again he's stagnant, he's at that level only. So if someone goes on to from Dhyana Yoga, in order to complete his journey, he has to progress to the top, Bhakti Yoga. So then only he attains the goal of that yoga. So then there's also the Bhakti process. In the Bhakti process, the difference is one understands the goal right from the beginning. So right from the beginning, one understands that goal, and the processes are especially tailored to reach that goal. So there is never a chance of losing one's goal. So in this way, one directly approaches the Supreme Lord. And by doing this, they attain that eternal kingdom. So here we can step back a little and see what are the topics we have covered so far. We heard about the material world and its network of karma and desire, how Krishna gives the allegory of the banyan tree, the upside down reflection of the banyan tree. And then we heard about the goal, the ultimate goal of human existence, which is basically Purushottama, the Supreme Lord. And now Krishna continues further about the activities of this conditioned jiva, what he does in Prakriti. In Prakriti, right, he has these different activities. So going back to this diagram, so there's this verse, Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke, Jiva Bhutaha Sanatanaha, Mana Sastanindriyani, Prakriti Karshati. So before that, what I'm trying to say here is this verse, Mamai Vamso Jiva Loke. So he's saying basically the jivas within this material creation, the Jiva Bhutas, they are eternal. But that's a very important point he mentions here, which is a very powerful evidence. He basically says, the living entities in this conditioned world are my eternal fragmental parts. Amsa, right? Mama means my. Avamso. Amsa means fragments, part of it, right? And in this way, we are all basically just like the child is from the Lord, from the father or the mother, right? So in this way, we are directly from our eternal Father. And we are eternal. We are eternally separate and we are eternal. There's no temporary about it. So therefore, we share the same qualities of the Supreme Lord. But we are amsa, small, tiny. Due to conditioned life, they are struggling very hard with the six senses, which include the mind. Now, he's talking about the conditioned souls. There are two types of souls. So, those who are not conditioned and those who are conditioned. So, basically, there is only one type, soul, jiva. So, these jiva who are in the spiritual world, together with the Supreme Lord, they are not conditioned by material creation, by material energy. So, they are called the infallible. Whereas the jivas who are conditioned within those who have chosen to enter into prakriti, into material energy, they become conditioned. And due to this conditioning, they struggle very hard with the six senses, which include the mind, within this material creation, and they carry out various activities or karma, and they get trapped in the cycle of birth and death. So then Krishna continues with this. The living entity in the material world carries his different conceptions of life. So this is called vasanas. Conception means their feelings, their likings, likes and dislikes. Impressions, that's the word. Vasanas, right? They carry these different impressions, conceptions of life from one body to another, driven by their desire and controlled by karma, according to their deserving capacity. How is this carried from one life to another? Just like how the air carries aromas. So I mentioned this yesterday, right? How we transfer, how the wind carries the rose, the fragrance of the rose is carried by the wind from the garden. It's invisible, but nevertheless it comes. And then we are able to smell it, even if when we are away from the garden. So in this way, the soul, invisible, is carried by the subtle body at the time of death into another gross body. So the subtle body is the vehicle which carries the soul from one gross body to another gross body. Remember the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and ego. So these things carry our impressions. Thus, he takes one kind of body and again quits it to take another. And then Krishna continues, the living entity, thus, taking another gross body, obtains a certain type of ear, eye, tongue, nose, and sense of touch, which are grouped about the mind. He thus enjoys a particular set of sense objects. So that's why different people have different likes and dislikes. Some people, we have all kinds of orientations in this world. People who, nowadays more and more there are various perversions in human society. So there is the normal heterosexual type of people, and then there is the homosexual type of people, and then there is also the zoophilia type of people who actually have this kind of desires for animals. And then there is necrophilia, desire for dead bodies. So like that, why this kind of impressions come? So it's somehow carried from the past and it is modified according to the karma. So due to our certain sinful activities, it gets modified, and when they take the next birth, these impressions automatically bear fruit. So even without trying, they get this kind of impressions. So we have different likes and dislikes according to, so we can't help ourselves. So that's what happens. Why we like to eat certain type of food. So as we get conditioned, the conditioning comes from the previous birth. It also continues within this birth. When the baby is born, he doesn't like to eat spicy food, isn't it? We give him strong food. Even he doesn't even take salt for the first few months at least. So how did he learn to like spicy food? How did he learn to like certain types of food? How did he learn to like liquor? How did he learn to like cigarettes? The baby is born, he doesn't like all these things. So by association, as he goes, he learns to, he conditions himself, sometimes forcefully, sometimes without, helplessly, he is conditioned. So this is what happens, and he develops certain likes and dislikes, according, which is all grouped about the mind. It's all function of the mind. All these senses are basically a function of the mind. So the key here is to control the mind. So if you remember from previous lessons, the mind can be the worst enemy or can be the best friend. So by the process of yoga or bhakti, we can learn to control the mind. So we heard about how the gross elements transform to knowledge acquiring senses, we get the working senses, and then we also have the subtle body, mind, intelligence, and false ego. And in this way, we enjoy the sense objects, the tanmatras, form, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And Krishna continues, one whose eyes are trained in knowledge can see all this for what it actually is. But nevertheless, this cycle of birth and death is like a prison, right? And it is trapped. We are trapped. What are the bars which are holding us here? It is basically the three modes of material nature subjected by the law of karma. So together we are trapped within this situation, right? And we undergo again and again repeated birth and death. So looking back again, what are the topics we have covered so far? Material world and its network of karma, we have covered. The conditioned jiva, we have talked about. Krishna mentions all this in these verses. So particularly he says how the jivas are his eternal fragmental parts. So natu evaham jatu nasam natvam neme janadipaha, right? In chapter 2, Krishna says, never was there a time where you nor all these kings nor I did not exist. So we always were existing, we will always exist. In the future also we will always exist. We will never merge, we will never join together, because the jiva, the soul, is eternally separate, fragment. We are never joined together with the Lord. We only have a relationship with the Lord. So the transmigration of the soul was discussed. The endeavoring yogi bhakta is able to see this clearly. So these two verses talked about that. So what is the key here? The key is also understanding. It begins the controlling the mind, the processes, yoga, understanding the path. All this begins first of all by hearing, Shravanam, right? And it begins by knowledge. So transcendental knowledge has to be given. So Prabhupada likes to ask, which university is giving this kind of transcendental knowledge? So no one is really speaking about these things. We have so many departments, so many sections, so many subsections of science or arts, but no one really talks about this knowledge which is able to deliver us from this cycle of birth and death. So then it goes on to continue. Then Krishna now talks about more about the Purushottama Krishna, about himself. And this is, we will cover it in 12:15. But before we talk about that, this knowledge that we are speaking about, this knowledge of transcendence, of going beyond, where can we get this knowledge? People may ask. So for that, we can try to understand from this model. Now we have the material world, right? Material creation. And there are many jivas here, and all these jivas are all conditioned. So amongst these many jivas, one of them may have a question. They may want to know more about why am I suffering? Who am I? Is there God? Who created all these things? What is my objective? What is the purpose of my life? So they may have these questions. So how do they get these questions answered? Is it possible for them to answer these questions? Okay, there is also, basically he has these questions about the spiritual world and about God. So how to answer these questions? Can he find out by his own senses, by the power of his 5 senses? Can he find out about it? So by any type of extension of those senses, like for example, by experimental work, by scientific exploration, because ultimately the scientific exploration and all that is ultimately taken in by the senses, right? So we just create extensive instruments to detect them. So it's not possible because all of this is matter within the material world. We are trying to understand something which is beyond the material world, which is beyond our experience, which is something which we have never seen or beyond, never heard of before. So if someone has never seen the ocean, if we try to, and they have only seen the river, the ditch, the pond near their house, but they have never seen the ocean, how do we explain about the ocean to them? In whichever way we explain, they can never really understand it until they themselves see the ocean. So in this way, can we try to understand by logic, by philosophical conclusion, speculation, by hypothesis, theories, right? Like scientists like to come up with the Big Bang theory, the chemical evolution theory, Darwinism and all that. So how do we understand all this? Is it possible with logic? Still, it's not, because our logic is based on our experiences within this world. We do not know about the experiences outside this material world. So the logic, the rules of logic may be very different over there, right? So for example, someone may say, all dung or all stool or excrement, you know, is terrible, disgusting, and it's dirty, and it's untouchable, and it's full of bacteria. So someone may say that. But the Vedic scriptures say that's true, but the cow dung is different. The cow dung is pure. It's so pure that one can bathe deities with it. It is pure, and scientists, and last time when we tell them, nobody will believe, because dung, you know, cow dung, is any kind of excretion. So, but nowadays we are able to prove it. It is actually antiseptic. One can produce medicines with it. One can actually apply salve of cow dung on people, on wound, and it can heal. So then somebody might say, okay, if the cow dung is pure, what about the Brahmana's dung? What about the Brahmana's stool, right? The Brahmana is supposed to be very pure. He understands. What about the sannyasi or a very great personality? What about his excrement? Is it pure also? So that kind of false logic, it's not pure. So that kind of false logic can lead people astray. So therefore, logic can never go beyond matter, our own experience. So then absolute knowledge about God is coming from the spiritual world. So it has to be brought down from the spiritual world to the material world, either by the Supreme Lord directly, or by his representatives, or by scripture. So the process is called Shabda. Shabda means authoritative hearing. It is not something which we can discover through logic or through experiment. It is authoritative hearing from authority. So therefore, there's this beautiful verse in the Bhagavatam, Tene Brahma Hridaya Adikavaye. So the Vedic knowledge was revealed by the Supreme Person within the heart of the first created being, Brahma. So this is Srimad Bhagavatam, verse 1.1.1. So like that, and eventually in other places also, the Supreme Lord reveals this Vedic knowledge, and along the way, it may be lost. So therefore, the Vedic wisdom comes down in disciplic succession through oral reception in bygone ages. In different yugas, it was all orally received. Only in Kali Yuga, because of the shortness of memory and the lack of intelligence and the shortness of life of the people in Kali Yuga, these oral reception was set down in writing. So in this way, we can understand, and also in chapter 4, we heard about how Krishna gave this knowledge to Vivaswan, the sun god, and then how it came down, and then it was broken at one point of time. So there are many disciplic successions. So in this world, currently in Kali Yuga, there are only 4 sampradayas which are coming directly from the Supreme Lord, which are still existing, which have been mentioned before, right? The Brahma Madhava Sampradaya, the Kumara Nimbarka Sampradaya, the Rudra Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, the Sri Ramanuja Sampradaya. So these are the 4. And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came within one of these sampradayas, the Brahma Madhava Sampradaya, and he again unified all the teachings properly to finally ultimately point to the direct goal, the supreme goal. So therefore, then Krishna continues. So one who can understand this knowledge which has come through this disciplic succession, only they can unlock the mysteries of the Vedic scriptures, because they have the key. So, and to understand this supreme person, the Purushottama, right? So Krishna gives some extra verses to talk about how we can understand him. So he has mentioned some of this before in other verses. So here previously he said, "I'm the light of the sun." So therefore here he says, "I am the splendor of the sun, which dissipates the darkness of this whole world, and it all comes from me." I think I copied this wrongly. So basically, all knowledge comes from the Supreme Lord. He's like the sun. When there's a lot of fog, right? Early in the morning, there's fog or mist. There is no human activity which can remove all the fog instantaneously. But when the sun rises, instantaneously the fog and the mist just dissipates, just like that. So in the presence of the Supreme Lord, or in the presence of his representatives, the bona fide acharyas, or in the presence of these scriptures which describe and glorify him, the ignorance, the darkness born of ignorance is immediately dissipated. And then Krishna says, "I am also the splendor of the moon, and the splendor of fire are also from me." Right? So the moon, he says, "I become the moon and thereby supply the juice of life to all vegetables." So basically, this is Vedic understanding of the function of the moon, many other functions of the moon, but one of the functions of the moon is to infuse nourishment and juice into all growing things. So that's why in Vedic scriptures, basically in the Vedic tradition, we have a lot of festivals during full moon time. So at that time, people used to go out, and just simply receiving the rays of the moon is very auspicious. Even there is scientific research going on, that it went on before, that they have found that when lunatics, people who are mad, when they are exposed to intense concentrated moonlight, they have a very good apparatus for that. They found that it's able to reduce the madness. It sort of dissipates a little. So there is actually some kind of connection. The moon is very much connected to the mind. And Krishna says also, "I am the orbit of all planets. I enter into each planet, and I hold these planets in their orbits so that they don't collide with each other. They all remain in perfect synchrony. I am also the fire of digestion." So basically what Krishna is trying to say that for your benefit, O Jiva, I have produced this material creation for your enjoyment, right? And therefore he's saying, you want to enjoy tasty food stuff, you want to enjoy eating it and everything. So I am the fire of digestion within your stomach. In Ayurveda, we call it Jatagni or Vaishvanara. So that means it's like the fire of digestion. Is that fire, do we have control of that fire of digestion? Can we suddenly say, okay, I am now going to increase my digestion a bit more because I'm going to eat a lot? Can we say like that? It doesn't work like that, isn't it? We may try to take certain things to help us in our digestion, but we don't have control over it. Sometimes our digestion is good, sometimes it's not, according to our karma. But if at all we are able to digest, many things within our body, we don't have control. Do we have control of a lot of things? We don't have. Some we can by performing certain yogas, we can, but still not many of the things we don't really have this control. And it's by the grace of the Lord that these things go on. I am also the air of life, which goes in and comes out. So Krishna says, I am that prana. So then we come to this very nice verse. Sarvasya chaham hridishani vishto matta smriti jnanam apohanam cha vedaischa sarvair aham eva vedyo vedanta krit vedavit eva chaham. Translation: I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me comes remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas, I am to be known. Vedaischa sarver, from all the Vedas, aham eva vedyo, I am to be known. So that's the purpose behind the Vedas. Purpose behind all the other aspects ultimately is to bring us to this platform. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta. So that was Vyasadeva, right? Vyasadeva is actually an incarnation, a Satyavesha avatar of Krishna. And I am also the knower of the Vedas. So basically this is to show that the Vedas are not ordinary. They are directly coming from the Supreme Lord. And the goal is for us to understand. Just like if the Father is Krishna, if we want to know who our Father is, we don't go around experimenting, right? Do we go around asking every man, are you my father? Are you my father? Are you my father? If a child wants to know who his father is, very simple. He will ask his mother, and the mother will tell, oh child, this is your father. So similarly, the Vedas are like our mother. If we want to know who God is, then the revealed scriptures are like our mother. So the material, we have heard about these points. We have already covered it. Purushottama, right? We heard about the supreme splendor, the supreme maintainer, how he maintains the orbits, how he maintains all of us. And then he'll go on to talk about the supreme personality, his position. And then we'll go on to hear about the ultimate goal of existence. So this chapter is quite short, only 20 verses. So we have come to the 18th verse. Yasmat ksharam atito aham aksharat api chotamaha ato asmi loke vedecha pratitaha purushottamaha. Because I am transcendental. I am transcendental beyond both the fallible and the infallible. So here he's talking about the jivas, the fallible jivas and the infallible jivas, those who are in the material world, who are conditioned, and those who are in the spiritual world, who are not conditioned. So I am beyond both of these jivas. So I am beyond them. So he's the supreme personality, Purusha Uttama. So there will always be a distinction between the jivas and the Supreme Lord. And because I am the greatest, right? I am celebrated both in the world and in the Vedas as that supreme person. So Krishna establishes his position again in this verse. So ultimately, by understanding Prakriti, by understanding material creation, and by understanding karma and all this, eventually come to this point where the ultimate goal is to understand the Supreme Lord. And then this verse comes, Yo mam evam asam mudho. Okay, now I'll just go straight to the translation. Whoever knows me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead without doubting is actually the knower of everything, because he has understood the highest goal, the purpose of all knowledge, the purpose of creation, the purpose of matter, the purpose of everything ultimately aims towards that one single point, to understand who that Supreme Personality of Godhead. Because simply by understanding that, he can make his life perfect. And by that I mean he can attain the goal of his existence, the purpose of his existence. So he therefore engages himself, understanding this, the knower of everything. He therefore engages himself in full devotional service. Bhajati, sa sarvavid bhajati mam, in full devotional service to me, O son of Bharata. So there is no doubt on this aspect. And this is the last verse. This is the most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures. So basically, he's talking about the Upanishads. The most confidential part of the Vedic scriptures are the Upanishads, and the cream of the Upanishad is Veda. The essence of the Upanishad is Vedanta, and the topmost Upanishad is Bhagavad Gita, and the cream of all these Upanishads is very much expanded in the Srimad Bhagavatam, where full descriptions of the Supreme Lord is given in the Srimad Bhagavatam about his Nama, Rupa, Guna, Leela. So we have understood this position of the Lord. But wouldn't we be curious to know more about the Supreme Lord? What does he do? How does he behave with his devotees? What are the wonderful activities that goes on in the spiritual world? How does he look like? What are his qualities? So all this is fully revealed in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Gita is to understand who God is, and Bhagavatam is to further and strengthen that faith, and to further give us full information about that position of the Supreme Lord and the full details, autobiography, one could say, of the Supreme Lord. Okay, so with that, that concludes this chapter 15. So I'd just like to talk about our founder Acharya, Srila Prabhupada. So in relation to this particular verse, so understanding this concept of the Bhagavad Gita and all that, so therefore Srila Prabhupada, he traveled to the West and he established this society for the sole mission. He didn't name the society after himself. So many people name it after themselves, but Prabhupada was always firm that he was always to be in the background. It is always about Krishna and never about himself or anybody else. So just a brief biodata if you have the time. So Srila Prabhupada was born just one day after Janmashtami, the day after. So even then, Prabhupada did not want to take birth on the day where Krishna is glorified. So, but he still wanted to be very close to Krishna. So therefore, he was born on the day after Krishna was glorified, so that the limelight doesn't fall on him. So he was born to Gaur Mohan Dey, the father, and mother is Rajini. And by the time he was 5 years old, he was already performing Radha Yatra within his neighborhood. He bugged his father and said, I want to perform Radha Yatra. So his father built a toy cart for him, and then they got the whole village. It's not a village, it's like a city in Calcutta. So he got the neighborhood to be involved in the Radha Yatra festival. It was basically a Radha Yatra for children. He got all his friends in the neighborhood, and they all prepared food, and they came and offered food stuff to Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra, and he was performing the Arati. And even when he was born, an astrologer predicted that he will grow, and then he will build 108 temples all over the world, and he will bring Radha Yatra all over the world. And he will establish a house for the whole world to live in. And Srila Prabhupada, he received he grew up, he studied chemistry, pharmacy, and this was during the Gandhi movement. And he was a follower of Gandhi at one point of time. And then finally he met his guru, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj. And during that time, during the first meeting, when he didn't want to come because he thought, there are so many sadhus, I've seen so many of them. They all ultimately, they talk about things which are not practical. So, but his friend said, no, this sadhu is different. You must come. So then he came, and during the first meeting, he was giving a class. Suddenly he looked up, and then he looked at Srila Prabhupada. At that time, he was called Abhay Charan. His name was Abhay Charan. And he looked at him and said, you are a young man, educated young man. Why don't you preach the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world? And then he replied, but I think, shouldn't we first get independence? Then only who will hear our mission? But then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati told him, this mission cannot wait. It is urgent. So the whole world is in need of Krishna consciousness, so that there can be a change in society everywhere, change of heart. So it cannot, politics will come and go, but politicians will always remain. So we cannot wait for these things. So that somehow convinced him, and it left a very deep impression upon him, the way he said it and how it went, and he changed his life. So he received formal initiation at the age of 26 in 1932. And in this way, he had a family and all that. But eventually, at the age of, I think 58, if I'm not mistaken, he took sannyas in 1959. He wanted to dedicate fully in his mission into serving the mission of his guru. So this is Srila Prabhupada. He took sannyas. This is his guru, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. And this is where he lived, within the Radha Damodar temple in Vrindavan. But while he was there, he was always meditating upon the mission of his guru. The guru has already left the world at that time. He was always thinking, because the guru always told him, you should preach. You are very good in English. You have been brought up in an English school. So you should preach this mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu all over the world. And he was always meditating on this in front of the Radha Damodar temple, praying to one of the acharyas in our sampradaya, Srila Rupa Goswami, who was the direct disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So in this way, then he started writing the Srimad, translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. One of his many activities as a sannyas, he was distributing pamphlets and literatures to people in Delhi. He would use to print them, typeset them, edit them all on his own, and he would use to go and distribute these literatures to everybody. At the same time, he was also translating Srimad Bhagavatam into English. That was his first work. So then he was getting older, and he was very much pushed by this order of his Guru Maharaj. So his Guru Maharaj told him, you should go, but he's getting older. He was already 68, 69. And then he used to go and meet this lady. This somehow, by some connection, there was this wealthy Gujarati lady called Sumati Morarji. And she was actually the owner of a shipping company, steamships. And this shipping company, these ships would regularly travel to the United States. So he thought at that time, the USA was the most important country in the world. And if I can preach this message over there, then the whole world will accept, and India will also follow. Because people in India, they were no longer, they were all trying to follow the West. And they thought, if I tell them spiritual things, they will not accept. If the West follows what I'm giving them, and then the Indian people will again accept. Because currently the Indian people like to ape the West. So that's the problem. So like that, he went to speak to Murarji, but she will tell him, oh, Swamiji, you are alone. You are so old. You're 68 years old. And what you're going to do? India, in that time, the only way, there was no air. They didn't go by aeroplane. They used to go by ship. It used to take months to travel to. And there's nothing for you to eat. At your age, there are harsh winters over there. And then everything is full of meat. What will you eat? You will die. But Prabhupada was very insistent. And then she will reject him each time. No, I cannot have that on my conscience. I cannot send you to US, and then if anything happens to you, how am I going to live with that? But Prabhupada was determined. Again and again, he will come. So finally, Sumati Murarji, she gave in, and she allowed him to go through one of the ship. So she gave him a ticket. So this ship is Jaladuta. It's not a passenger ship. It's not a cruise ship. It is actually a cargo ship. And in that cargo ship, he was given a small bunker, a cabin, a dinghy cabin. And in there, all he brought with him was a sack of potatoes and some rice. And he brought with him, some trunks of Bhagavatam. Most of it was Bhagavatam. So he had many books which he had printed and published, and he brought them, Srimad Bhagavatam. At that time, he had translated only 3 of that books. And he had about 40 rupees with him. And he didn't really know anybody else in the USA. He didn't have a society, he didn't have temples, he didn't have anybody else. But he had great faith in the order of his Guru Maharaj. And in this way, he went. But while he was in the ship, he suffered. There was lots of, Krishna tested him very much. So there was, he actually had seasickness, and all he could eat was potatoes and rice, and he cooked them himself. He will sit there within his cabin and he will cook it himself with a small stove, and then somehow he will eat and he will meditate on the Lord. He will chant Hare Krishna. He will translate his Srimad Bhagavatam, and he suffered seasickness. And along the way, there were storms and terrible, and the Atlantic Ocean. To go to the west, he had to go through Atlantic Ocean, which is very turbulent, one of the most turbulent oceans in the world. And he also suffered heart attack. Once he suffered heart attack, but managed to somehow survive. And then he suffered, and then he thought in his mind, if I have one more heart attack, then I think I will not survive this trip. And then, out of his intense prayers, one day Krishna came in his dream. And in this dream, Krishna was in a boat, and he was paddling the boat, and Prabhupada was in it, and he smiled at Prabhupada. And right after this dream, the entire Atlantic Ocean became calm. And later on, when they interviewed the captain of that ship, Jaladuta, the captain is a very experienced captain, 30, 40 years he was a captain. And he says, he recalls, never in my career did I encounter such a peaceful Atlantic Ocean, because Atlantic is known for its turbulence. Never in my career. That was the most peaceful voyage I ever made. So then finally, Prabhupada came to Boston Harbor. So Boston Harbor, and he came and he wrote poems. He wrote several poems. So in one of the poems, he says, "Oh Krishna, you have brought me here somehow by my desire of my Guru. I don't know what to do. I don't know whether to turn left. I don't know whether to turn right. But you have brought me here, and now you must make me dance. I am your surrendered soul. So please make me dance. Please make me dance." So he wrote that poem in Bengali. So then you can see Prabhupada in Boston Harbor. He was alone. And somehow, by one connection, he had one single family who he knew. And then it was a lady married to a man married to a Western lady who was staying there. And somehow he went to his house, and from there, he started preaching. And then he thought, from that house, it's not good that I stay here. So he wasn't able to preach. So he was thinking what to do. Then finally, he left on his own. He went alone to New York to a very rundown street. It's called the Bowery, and rented a small shop, and used an old shop. This shop was abandoned, and it was still within. It's like a slum area. Bowery is called in New York, and there he rented a small shop, and in this way he planned what to do. So what he did, so you can see here Prabhupada in one of the winter times, he didn't know what to do. So what he did was he went to Tompkins Square Park, a popular park over there, and by the tree, he sat down by the tree. It's a very famous tree now. It's actually labeled over there as Prabhupada's memorial. So he sat under that tree, and all he had with him was a kartal. And he started singing Hare Krishna with the kartal. So, and that was the historical moment. So all he had was intense desire. He closed his eyes, he sang the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And as I mentioned yesterday, this was the time the hippie movement was going on. So there were a lot of young people who were hippies, who have left society, and they are like trying to look for a meaning in life. So somehow they were attracted by his chanting, and they came and they started dancing around him. They started doing things. And Prabhupada, by their chanting, they got attracted. And then after that, he invited them. They all participated by the chanting. And somehow, by Krishna's mercy, they were sufficiently purified that they thought that they will come and hear more from this Swamiji. So the Swamiji invited him to this shop lot. So this is the shop lot. The name of the shop is called Matchless Gift. And this is where he invited them, come over, I'll cook for you nice prasadam. we will have a nice chanting session and Bhagavad Gita class. So they were intrigued. Some of them were college dropouts, some of them were high school dropouts. So, and some of them were taking drugs, and they all had many girlfriends, and they were all having all kinds of bad activities. But still, they were all searching. They were all looking for a higher meaning in life. So in those days, taking drugs like LSD and marijuana is supposed to bring them to a higher, it was like to bring them to a higher level. So they used to think like that. But anyway, so they came, and Prabhupada patiently spoke to them. He cared for them. He taught them chanting. And within 1 year, he was able to initiate them. And then you can see here the picture. And then he established ISKCON. So this is where the explosion took place. It began here and it exploded. And he was somehow able to convert all these hippies into beautiful happies, into devotees. You can see here how they were all wearing dhoti kurta, how they were. This is called transformation of life. So Prabhupada was able to transform their life 360 degrees into accepting Vedic culture, into students of Bhagavad Gita. They gave up their bad habits. They started following the 4 regulative principles. Prabhupada insisted. He told them, I want you to avoid illicit sexual activity. I want you to stop eating meat, give up coffee and tea, give up even onion and garlic, and eat only pure vegetarian food, particularly prasadam. And then he told them, no intoxications, no drugs, no cigarette, no coffee and tea, no caffeine, no any kind of drug. And then he told them also, these are the 4 regulative principles, right? No intoxication, no meat eating, no illicit sex, and no gambling. Yeah, these are the 4. And they were able to follow somehow. They had the faith in him. They trusted him. They had the faith in him. And like this, he established ISKCON in New York. Then he went to San Francisco. And then like that, he went to different states in the USA. He went to Canada. And therefore, the Hare Krishna explosion began. Miracle on 2nd Avenue. This is in San Francisco. And then he sent some disciples even to other places. So then you can see here some of the activities which he had. So he was invited into he tried to penetrate into various places to give talk. So this is one of the auditoriums which he went to. So Yoga Society, he had a discussion with Allen Ginsberg, a famous personality at that time. And in this way, he was able to convert all the people who heard him. So Allen Ginsberg is also there. So there are a lot of different people, and they all became devotees. So this shows the first Radha Yatra. The first Radha Yatra they had in San Francisco. And it was it's a very huge success. And then they also had their first Radha Yatra in London. They sent some devotees to London, and they were very successful. They somehow were able to connect with the Beatles. George Harrison took interest. And eventually, they had their first London Radha Yatra in 1970. So you can see the picture here of all the London Radha Yatra, which took place in 1970. Lord Jagannath, Baladev, and Subhadra were brought throughout the main streets of London, to Trafalgar Square and to all the main fountain place, and in front of Nelson's column. And this is all by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. And he initiated many disciples. And true to the prediction of the astrologer, he built 108 temples, big temples all over the world, many other small centers, farm communities, established Food for Life Society. So Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, the largest book trust in the world, which deals with Vedic literatures. And many of them, he wrote many literatures, and he wrote them on his own. And here we can see Prabhupada, even to his dying bed, at the final moment when he was leaving his body, he did not finish translating his Srimad Bhagavatam. So from the 10th canto, he finished up to 14 books. But the last 11th and 12th canto, he did not. So he was still Up to the last moment, while he was still in his dying bed, the last things he was doing was translating Bhagavatam. He was, you can see here, a dictaphone, and the devotees were holding the dictaphone to him, and he was translating Bhagavatam until his last moment. So this is basically the ISKCON society, which he built. It's described that he built a house for the whole world to live in. So many projects all over the world. So between 1968 and 1977, it's a very short period of time. He left the world in 1977. He came to America in 1968. At the age of 72, at the age of 68, he came to America, right? And throughout this period, he dictated total of 22,000 pages of text. He created Back to Godhead magazine, which had a monthly distribution of 1 million copies per month. He wrote 7,000 letters to his disciples, which were published in 5 volumes of books. And he translated his main contribution, the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his main contribution. The Bhagavad Gita, which he translated as well. And lectures given on the Bhagavad Gita alone, which came up to 7 volumes of books. He had conversations which were recorded in 42 volumes of books. Innumerable recordings he produced, 108 temples and farm communities within 12 years, 147 books which he published, traveled around the world 14 times at his age, at the age of 70 plus. Besides this, he initiated and changed the lives of 10,000 disciples who all became his disciples. And all of this he did within 11 years, in the age between 70 to 80. And it said that he only had about 2 to 3 hours of sleep, because he will spend his night time translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. That was his dedication to our society. So this is Radha Yatra today. Today means a few years ago. Every year it's been going on, these Radha Yatras all over the world. This is in London. And now we have the main temple project building we have many big temples, but this is the main temple project headquarters in Sridham, Mayapur. So this is the vision, and this is the current structure, which is up. So the superstructure is up, but the internal parts are still being built. So this is in West Bengal, and you can see there the Ganga by the side. So this is Mayapur Dham. And this is Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi. So after he took Samadhi, after he left the planet, his Samadhi was put in Vrindavan, where Krishna Balaram temple is built. And this is the story of the Hare Krishnas, the mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all. So there's a movie also. This is the movie. It was showed in Malaysia also about 3-4 years ago. It came out, but there were many other documentaries before that also. But this movie came out about 4 or 5 years ago. So anyway, with that we can end. So thank you for staying with me. So this is our takeaway, right? So we basically covered in chapter 15 about the material world and its network of karma and desire, the conditioned soul, and how he is going through these activities, and Purushottama Krishna, our eternal well-wisher. So the takeaways are: the material world is a mere pale reflection of the spiritual world. Purushottama Krishna is our ever well-wisher and the ultimate goal of life. And one who knows this has full and complete knowledge. So we leave you with this verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. One who constantly hears and chants the holy name of the Lord and hears and chants about his activities can very easily attain the platform of pure devotional service, which can cleanse the dirt from one's heart. So how can we attain this pure devotional service so that we can understand Purushottama? So there, the method is given over here. One who constantly hears and chants the holy name of the Lord, right? And hears about his activities and chants about his activities that means basically speaking about the glories of the Lord, can very easily attain the platform of pure devotional service, which can cleanse the dirt from one's heart. So this has the power to remove, to to remove the ill desires, to purify our desires, not to make our mind empty of desires, but to purify our misguided desires to become pure desires towards the service of the Supreme Lord. And that by those desires and by the mercy of the Lord, we will attain the supreme abode. So one cannot achieve such purification merely by observing vows and performing Vedic ritualistic ceremonies. So this is what Bhagavatam says, 6.3.32. So with that, we would like to request everyone to chant along with us. We will chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra 3 times today, but we begin with this verse. Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Om Tat Sat. So I hope we can also continue with this chanting. So this is the Srimad Bhagavatam, 18 volumes in all, 12 cantos. So it's basically the masterpiece, the opus magnus of Srila Prabhupada, his life's work. With Srimad Bhagavatam, he went to the West, and with Srimad Bhagavatam, he left the world. So, and this is the certificate, and please, there will be a quiz. Remember, we are group 2. So I will request all of you to also take part in the quiz. And now we can end if there are any questions today. Sorry for the extra time. I've overshot quite badly. 9:15. Apologies. Tomorrow I will keep track. I had to finish this. So let me look at the chat. Okay. Okay, so there's no questions, I think, today. Right.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki. Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you very much.
Tomorrow is Thursday.
Oh yeah, tomorrow is Thursday, so I won't have class tomorrow. So see you on Friday.
Okay.
Thanks for reminding.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhu.